us to pay homage to him.
We have always been the prize because we have always had and still have something that other people won't, think they can't do without, and don't care to pay for. Because we have always been the prize, we have been under siege for over 3,000 years. Nothing that ever brought into Africa from the outside was meant to do the African any good.
She made me to know my history, to know my roots. So I grew up with a love for myself and secure within myself, never feeling inferior and certainly not feeling superior, but that chip on the shoulder that the young lady spoke about is my self-assurance, my confidence, my ability to speak the truth without fear. I don't bend when I don't have to. I don't scratch where I don't itch. I look white people in the eye and speak honestly and truthfully and candidly and unhypocritically to you. That's not a chip. That's just self-assurance that comes from self-knowledge. Teach your children that, and whether we are here or there, we'll be able to make a future for ourselves.
Who are you? You don't know? Don't tell me Negro, that's nothing. What were you before the white man named you a Negro? And where were you? And what did you have? What was yours? What language did you speak then? What was your name? It couldn't have been Smith or Jones or Bunch or Powell. That wasn't your name. They don't have those kind of names where you and I came from. No, what was your name? And why don't you now know what your name was then? Where did it go? Where did you lose it? Who took it? And how did he take it? What tongue did you speak? How did the man take your tongue? Where is your history? How did the man wipe out your history? What did the man do to make you as dumb as you are right now?
In fact, recently, some lot of garbage is written in books by people who call themselves historians, making it appear as if we have to thank Lyndon Baines Johnson for the advancement because he signed the Civil Rights Bill. Of course he signed it, but while he was signing it, we were in the streets burning the country down. You better hurry and sign it. Burn the whole country down. Do it quick. But if you're not careful, you will thank Lyndon Baines Johnson.
I say now, give us that poetry on number 7. He wanted to go to heaven, so I took him in 7. You took him in 7. I am the king of the world. Hold it. I'm pretty. Hold it, you're not that pretty. I'm a bad man. Wait. I shook up the world. I shook up the world.
So we always say the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips, I am a revolutionary.
Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Melanated Power Hour. I'm your host, Sam Pope Jr., and I'm so honored, so thankful, so blessed to have you back with us one more time as we discuss issues pertinent to the African Diaspora. And once again, for those who are new to the show, the African Diaspora is anywhere that black people may be, whether it be Jackson, Mississippi, Natchez, Mississippi, Nashville, Tennessee, Haiti, Puerto Rico, Barbados, you name it. We recognize those places as our homes away from home, but we also recognize the fact that we are indeed African, and the continent of Africa is our home indeed. I am joined again by the man, the myth, the legend, the funniest man I know, comedian Just Will. What say you, my brother?
What say you, my brother? Man, I am super excited, man, because last week, we had a topic, we had a subject and everything, and there was a lot of questions, and there was a lot of things answered. And at the end of the show, I was like, yo, it would be so dope if you could actually do something. And I'm going to let you spring it on, but I'm super excited because usually it takes about 6 months, maybe a year or whatnot. And you be like, hey, remember what you asked me to do? Well, I did it. Well, here, you actually did it rapid. I mean, it was so fast. So I'm going to go ahead and let you talk about it.
Well, it wasn't necessarily anything special I did. For those in the listening audience that didn't catch the show last week, we talked about a great historical figure, which had a lot of significance to myself being from the state of Mississippi. We talked about Prince Abdulraham ibn Sori. And in the discussion of that subject, we brought up a descendant of his who's a member of that royal house, and you said it would be cool if we could have her on the show. And you kind of asked it like that's an assignment that that you won't be able to complete, but she has a wonderful team, and I was able to get some messages and a prompt response, and I'm so honored to introduce our guest for this evening, and that's Her Royal Highness Princess Karen Chapman of the House of Sori. How are you doing, ma'am?
Hello. I am so honored to be a part of your podcast. How are you doing?
We're wonderful, and the honor is all ours. And on this show, there are several things that we stress, and one of them is the importance of the recognizing of the African diaspora, also science literacy. So this is going to be great in terms of those two subjects. But I just want to point out to the listening audience that this is an episode which is quintessentially the definition of what I want to do week in and week out, especially when I had back in the day when we had the idea of the show, and that's to tie the diaspora with the continent and to do it with real people, you know, not just a fantasy thing. But in this particular episode, we're going to discuss places such as Fouta de John, Guinea, West Africa, Timbuktu, the University of Timbuktu, and we can tie all of that to North America where we are, especially in the state of Mississippi. It's so wonderful to be able to bring these two together, these two places, and sometimes we look at ourselves as other than, and so do they, but we all are essentially of the same lineage. So I want to point out a couple things for those who weren't listening last week, and I'll stop blabbering. Go ahead.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
I want to be correct, and I want to be polite and respectful. Would you like for us to say Princess, Your Highness? I mean, how would you like for us to address you? I want to respect you to the utmost.
I use Her Royal Highness Princess Karen Chapman. But most times people just call me Princess Karen. The reason I normally insist about the title is not to be pretentious, but to also bring a lot of recognition, because most people think that Meghan, Prince Harry's wife, is the only black royal that they've ever known about.
Right.
But there's plenty. So I tell people all the time, because when you're being a royal and you have work to do, because it really is a lot of work, you're you're also very direct.
Yes.
So a lot of times people come up and go, "Oh my goodness, is your name Princess?" And so I said, "No, my name is not Princess. It's Her Royal Highness Princess Karen." And that kind of divides, because a lot of people name, especially in our community, we have a lot of princesses and queenies and stuff like that. But this is a serious lineage that I have to carry that burden and that weight, because sometimes it's a burden, but it's something that I carry very pridefully. So for the show purpose, just refer to me as Her Royal Highness Princess Karen, and it's not because we're not friends, because I'm very close with you all. It's just that to make the point across to the importance of that lineage.
Absolutely,
not a problem.
Absolutely. Real quick before we go right into it, just to do a recap, Her Royal Highness Princess Karen, her great-grandfather was Prince Abdulraham ibn Sori, who was captured and brought into slavery. He existed in slavery for over 40 years before he could prove his royal lineage, and he was eventually freed. Because of his sojourn here, not only in the United States, but specifically Mississippi, that time produced another lineage, and that's Her Royal Highness Princess Karen. And we have some questions for her, and we'll let her have the floor to discuss anything she wants to discuss. But I wanted to ask first and foremost, Princess Karen, tell us about your great-grandfather. I know you can tell it better than I could, and his time on the continent and also his time here, specifically in the state of Mississippi.
Sure. So Prince Abdulraham Sori was first brought in on the slave ship, the Harriet, into New Orleans. Then he was purchased and took to the slave auction block, which they called it, at the Four Corners in Natchez, Mississippi. There he was sold to a gentleman by the name of Thomas Foster. During that time, he was trying to explain to them that he was actually a royal prince and was from a quite large dynasty that reached from parts of North Africa all the way down to some parts of South Africa. But of course, they didn't want to hear it. But what was kind of ironic was that he was speaking English. And at that time, a lot of the slaves weren't speaking, and they couldn't read and write, and Prince Sorry could. So his slave master, which was Thomas Foster, he knew he had something really great, and he wanted to hold on to Prince. So as time went on, Prince even ran away. He ran away. He was gone for about 2.5 weeks. But he found himself in the swampland in the wilderness because he got as far as probably into Vidalia, Louisiana, which is across the Mississippi, directly from Natchez. He decided to return because also he was trained in tracking. He had been the head of his father's army, so he had a really important position. He was the general, and so he knew how to do all of these maneuvers and strategic plannings when you're going against the enemy. He finally came back and he humbled himself. He was Muslim, but he humbled himself because he kind of came to terms when he was in the forest with God, or with Allah, as he would call God, and say, is this what I'm supposed to be? Is this because of what my family has done to other slaves? And that's a different story all in itself. But my family also helped the slave traders. They were selling, they would go to war with another tribe, and they would sell those slaves into captivity. So in his way, he felt that God was kind of giving him back, karma, karma, and was saying, okay, now you see what you have done. And he felt that his eyes were open and he had to go back and finish this journey. So he came back to the Thomas Foster plantation. The wife was in the kitchen doing some cooking or whatever, and he just bowed, which is symbolic in the African culture for Futu Jalan, was to just kneel down in front of her and says, do what you will with me. If that means to kill me, I humbly come back. At this point, he really didn't care if she killed him, but he felt that he had to complete this journey. But because of his grace, they didn't do anything to him. And he also helped their plantation flourish because cotton was growing out and tobacco was coming in, and he could do a lot of growth for them because he had been trained on how to harvest and how to plant. So he became a value that Thomas Foster was not willing to give up at any cost.
Absolutely. That was almost shocking for me because I didn't know that he ran away.
He did.
I did not know.
And he was free. He probably could have got away too. But and you often wonder, because when I first found out, because I've been on this story from birth,
yes.
So at first, I was angry a little bit. I was like, he was free and he came back. What is wrong with him? He could have went to Chicago, or something like that, right?
Right.
But when you're going through, I think also religious enlightenment, because I think at some point in all of our lives, we come to a point where, is this where God wants me to be? Is this my journey?
Yes.
And since he was a strict Muslim, and I think that he felt like he had to go back, right? Because if he ever made it back, he had to have some impact on what his family was doing in the transatlantic slave trades.
Yes. Absolutely. That's a wonderful aspect of it that I hadn't considered. Knowing the story, and how in history it's not a fairy tale, and there are aspects of it that we don't take into account, like helping the slave trader, but that I can clearly see how he could have a religious epiphany almost and say, hey, this is the lot I've got to bear right now because of our participation. Outstanding. The prince spent 40 years in Mississippi. Was it the typical experience, if that's so wrong to say, but in
No,
a lack
I
of a
understand
better,
what you mean. I
absolutely.
think you're asking, and not to interrupt, but I
No.
think you're saying from a regular slave that, was just brought from the ship, that didn't speak the language, didn't understand the religion. Was it different for Prince?
Yes.
Yes, indeed. It was definitely different for him because he was also allowed to marry, which was not common for slaves.
Yes.
He married Isabella, which is my great grandmother, and she already had some children when he married her. She had one, and then together they had 10 children. So I think just by the fact that he was able to marry, gave him certain liberties because of his intelligence and the value that he had to Thomas Foster. He also was able to grow his own vegetables and sell them in the Natchez market, which was also very uncommon. So you could tell that Prince's relationship with his white slave owner was quite different than the other slaves.
Yes. Yes.
So yes, there was a difference for him.
I know you've been very familiar, intimately familiar with the story from birth, as you said. But how old were you when you first realized the impact of your great grandfather and your relation to it in upholding that title and that lineage?
That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah. So it's kind of ironic because my mother and my father both my parents never married,
Okay.
right? And so I was raised with my stepfather and my mother. But my mother started telling me probably when I was about 3 or 4 that I was a princess, right? So I knew that. She said, this is something you can never forget. So she would tell me the story.
Yes.
And since I wasn't raised with my father's side of the family where the lineage comes from, she said, but I'm going to take you out to the country because I was born and brought up in Natchez. But after Thomas Foster died, his brother Levi took some of the slaves and went down to a little town off the 61, which is straight path to Wilkinson County, down to Perrytown in that area. And that's where my grandmother's mother, which is Prince Story's daughter, ended up being. So it wasn't, my grandmother lived till she was 103.
Wow.
So it's not that far removed. That's why I'm 4th generation.
Yes.
So I started kind of knowing there was a difference because we would go to town and even, white folks, as they would say at home, started pointing to me and they go, that's Prince Story's relative. She's related to those Fosters, and she's related to the Collins and the Adams and this type of thing. And I didn't know because not being raised with my father's family, I was like, Mom, are we related to those people? And she says, you're related to those people. And she would say, I'm going to introduce you. So I knew my grandmother, I knew my cousins, I knew my sisters and my brothers and all of those people on that side of the family. But it wasn't until I probably was about 10 years old that I knew that we were different, because in the town, and Natchez is this is white and this is black town.
Yes.
And when they would say she would walk with the arrogance of her great grandfather. I would get that a lot. They always thought I was arrogant.
Yes.
I was never arrogant. I just always knew who I was. So I walked the walk, right? You couldn't talk to me any kind of way. I look you straight in the face. That was funny because when the introduction came on, that's the way I was taught. Look everyone straight in the face. Whites, blacks, purple, yellow, green, whatever. But mostly whites, because that's all it was. I didn't see the first Asian in my life until I was about 17. And that's when I went away for college.
Yes.
So it was really a white-black type town. And I was taught to stand up, hold my head high. And then when I was about 15, my mother got a letter from the Moroccan embassy. And they wanted to know who this princess was, because we had an affiliation and a relationship that very few people talk about in the history books with Morocco.
Yes.
Because it says, if you read Terry Alfred's book, he said they thought that Prince Story was a Moor, that is an incorrect statement. He was a Guinean, but he was also a Moor, because his family was directly related to the royal family of Morocco because of his mother. So there was a different story that even Terry Ashford, that wrote the book Prince Among Slaves, did not have intimate knowledge of.
Wow.
Because when they went to the president's office to free Prince Sorry, they would not have freed him just because they thought he was a Moor. He had to prove he was a Moor. And it was the Moorish Sultan, which is now called the king, that said, he is one of us. We know his bloodline. Please free him under the treaty.
Yes.
And so this is how this took place. And that's a little bit of a history that has been left out.
Absolutely.
And that is why I share a lineage and a royal lineage with Morocco as well as Guinea.
Absolutely. And I'm so thankful for you clearing that up, because I think I mentioned last week when we were talking about your great-great-grandfather that he had mentioned that he was a Moor, and he had used Articles 2:16 to defend that position. But and I too am reading Prince Among Thieves, and you corrected that, and I'm so appreciative of correcting that information. Also, as your role, explain to the people the great works you do. I wanted to talk specifically about your Bright Star Foundation and the partnership that you have in the Natchez School District. Can you explain some of those foundations for us?
Sure. So I am the CEO and founder of the Princess Karen Chapman Foundation of Ancestry and Global Development. I started the foundation more as a humanitarian, and as a tribute to Prince Sorry. But I also wanted it to stand on its own, because I wanted to leave a legacy, not only for Prince Sorry, but to continue that legacy into my children, right? So I believe that to hold a legacy, or to hold it couldn't be a local legacy.
Right.
It had to be one globally. It had to have no political attachments. It could not be to where it could be controlled with government funding. So I refuse to accept any government funding, and I'm self-funded, right? And the reason I did this, because when you go abroad, because I lived in the Middle East for roughly 16 years, right? I lived in Qatar, and it was one of the most beautiful experiences I ever had in my life, and my children were raised there. And there is a freedom for Black Americans that we are blindsided. When you hear about the Middle East, you think about backwards people who want to bomb and do all the things to the United States, and there are those type people, but the majority of the people are not that way. They are most welcoming. The religion there is Muslim. But they also have Christians. They have Christian churches. They have universities. There's Colin Mellon there. There's Texas A&M there. There's Virginia Commonwealth. VCU is there, and a lot of people don't know that. So I wanted to help people. I wanted to help, some of the people from Nepal and India. And there's so much poverty in the world. There is so many people that don't have clean water. That they don't have shelter. I met a family in Nepal that stay in the field. They literally have blankets, and that's where they lay at night, and they don't have food. And so I wanted to team up with other organizations that I felt had the same vision, the mission and vision. The Gates Foundation shares that same vision, but what I try not to do is attach myself to something like. A lot of people have asked me why I don't use celebrities when I'm doing my PSAs. And the reason is, even, everyone has a reputation that can be smeared, especially with social media. It only takes one celebrity to get in some type of trouble, and all of a sudden, everything that my great-grandfather had suffered for and endured is out the window. So I tried to do it to where I let the people in the community speak for themselves. So I try not to own any like grassroots, because I really believe in the grassroots project, starting from the ground. But whatever I start, I let the communities own them because they're sustainable that way.
Yes.
If I'm trying to harness it and make a name for myself or do it that way, I'm not spreading that legacy. I'm not helping that community. So we do a lot of testing. We do research. When COVID hit, we launched campaigns that say fight COVID like a princess. We went into South Africa. I had research teams there. I partnered with the Doctors Among Borders, who actually did it for free. We have a research lab that is run by the South Africans. I know Mandela's granddaughter, Juanita, her and her husband David, they were proactive in helping me. So I've had a lot of help along the way. I've had people, big companies like Exxon, Cutter Gas. I've had Sasso that helped me start some of these grassroots projects under their corporate social responsibility programs that are still in existence. So when tragedy helps, like typhoons in the Philippines, I was there. My team was there. My volunteers were there. And sometimes people ask, well, how can you also work and you do these things? Because what I found out, I don't have to do them alone.
Yes. Yes.
You just have to facilitate and network and get people connected.
Absolutely.
The most powerful thing, people think social media is the most powerful thing. I'm going to tell you right now, it's still word of mouth and who you know.
Absolutely.
Because once you connect those dots and you network with people, we're only 6 people, they say, from knowing someone great, right? Someone, Shaquille O'Neal went to school with my cousin Vernell from Natchez, right?
Yes.
And then I can reach Vernell, who can reach someone who knows how to reach Shaquille. So you never give up. And I always tell people, you never accept no. I never accept no for my answer. I say, you can give it to me now, you can give it to me later.
Absolutely.
So so that's kind of the work that we've done, is to help. And then the Bright Star scholarship was near and dear to my heart. My grandmother, Agnes Thompson, which the scholarship is named after, and Bright Star was the name of her church, which is on Maple Street in Natchez, Mississippi. My grandmother did not finish school. She stopped when she was maybe in 6th grade. She taught herself how to read and write. She used to stutter. She stopped herself from stuttering. And she used to teach Sunday school, right? And she was Baptist and I grew up Catholic. And so she was teaching and teaching and teaching, but she was passionate about education and about humanity and to uplifting people. And she used to be a maid, and she was like Florence, I swear, from Good Times. She was like not from Good Times, from
Jefferson's.
Well, the Jeffersons. I swear she was just like that. I was like, well, how did you say that to Mr. Wilson? And she was like, because I'll quit, So she had an independence even in the domestic work that she had to do. But what she also told me is, whatever you do, even if it's a maid, you have integrity.
Sure.
And you do it as long. But she said, never let someone abuse you.
Absolutely.
If someone does not want you or somebody is mistreating you, get the strength to leave.
Yes.
Because you are always free.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
You say no one can hold you captive. And because of her, I am who I am, because she raised that strength in me, right? The princess title helped, but that foundation of my grandmother's words kind of built it for me.
Yes, ma'am.
And so with the Bright Star Foundation, I wanted to give other students, everyone gets scholarships for academics, right? You can get them if you have a grade point average of 3.0 of above. So there's plenty of money out there for that. But how about those students who are just DNC students? And they look and they hear all of this about, let's go into it. So they either got the military or they got college. And maybe they're not military bound, right? Maybe they're not college bound. So what do? A lot of times, especially in Natchez, where the economics is just not there. It's not we don't have a great way for people to really make money, unless they're nurses or in the education. And then I started thinking, we're losing the trades. And when we lose the trades, we lose the ability to make money just the regular way. We're losing
Yes.
carpenters.
Mm-hmm.
We're losing people who raise their own vegetables, gardens. We're losing welders.
Yes.
You know, even the cosmetologists, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to give a scholarship based off of one thing: your ability to put on paper, and it wasn't based off grammar. That we come up with a different slogan every year, but this year it was, if I could change the world, if I had all the resources in the world and I could change the world, how would I do it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like so they have to write an essay. They have to be nominated by a teacher or a fellow student. They cannot have any infractions, like, you know, they can't have misconducts in school, or, you know, be in trouble with the law. If they have been in trouble, they have been redeemed, because we believe in redemption.
Yes.
But they have a right to compete with the scholarship, and we will fund them on their quest. If they want to open a business, if they want to be entrepreneurs, that money goes for that, and it's not based on academics. So I partnered with the school, Adams County School District, which is Mr. Butcher, who has just been wonderful, and then the mayor, Mr. Gibson, the principal, Mr. Jackson, and they just, you know, embraced the idea, and we formed a partnership. And this is my pilot school, but I plan, it's called Global Path. That's the name of the sec for my scholarship fund, and it's called Global Path, and it's going to be all over the United States. That's my my goal. And then I'm going to take a group of students who won those essay contests, and I'm going to take them. I'm gonna have them take their DNA if they want to, and we'll try to visit those parts of the countries that they're from.
Wow.
So that's my overall goal, is to take those kids and give them something that they never thought they could do. Because I say, if I'm a little girl that came from Natchez, Mississippi, that was never supposed to do anything, and I've been to all 7 continents, including Antarctica. If I can do it, they can do it too.
Absolutely.
And I wasn't a brain in school. I was, you know, I went to school, but it was not because I had great grades. I just knew what I wanted to do with my life.
Yes. 2 things so important. There was a time, I even remember, Brother Brown, when I was in school, even the school system placed some importance on trades and learning a trade. Like they had auto mechanics, they had welding, they had drafting, and that has fallen. And that leaves that segment of the student population that doesn't really have interest in college.
Right.
Or, you know, what do they do? And that's so wonderful, so impactful. The second thing is it was so exciting when I was researching your background. On this podcast, we love to promote science literacy. And I remember when the pandemic first started, we would have heated discussions back and forth with listeners about vaccines, and it's the white man's thing. And not to make it racial, but we actually, that science comes from our continent. And it's so wonderful to hear you promote ancestry and DNA. Can you explain a little further the importance? And that's coming from a person who had his DNA taken about 2 years ago, and it has opened up people that I would have never met before.
Yeah. So I do want to, first I want to address the conspiracy theories, because I have a conspiracy theorist as a son, right? He's in college, and he's Prince Brenton McKnight. And you can go to our family page, which is the royal family of Prince Sorry. But he was refusing to take the vaccine. He felt that they were probably taking our DNA and doing something with it, or that they were going to try to kill off the black people if we took the vaccine, because it was a fake thing. And he didn't want to do his DNA because he felt as though they were taking his DNA. So this is what I've told him. And I still believe that people have the right to do what they want to do, because, you know, trying to give him the vaccine while he was asleep wasn't gonna work. Still a piece of his hair while he was asleep. But what I have found out is that we've been taking vaccines all our lives. When I was a kid, I got the measles, the chicken pox, the mumps. I got everything that was on the planet, right? My son has never had them because he was vaccinated.
Absolutely.
right? So if they wanted to do something to us, they could have did it way back then when tensions were really high between the races.
Yes.
The other thing about the DNA, I try to inform the best that I can. Perhaps maybe there's some big conspiracy out there to steal our DNA, but trust me, they already know who we are. Because every time you go to a doctor's office and they take your blood to run your test, they have your DNA.
Sure, sure.
So what are you trying to hide it from?
Right.
They know who you are. From the day that you got a social security number, they know who you are. You cannot get your social security check without a social security number. You cannot get a job without your social security number. You can't get a passport without your social security number, and they know who you are. From the day that you are born, where they take your blood from infancy, when you are born, they have your DNA.
Sure.
And they can track you and trace you. They always had our DNA. They didn't have a way until probably about the last 20, 30 years to where they could do DNA matching. And because remember, there is a company like Ancestry DNA, which I work with quite a bit. They are a private company.
Yes.
So private companies got into the business about 10 years ago. But before that, the government was already tracking with DNA.
Absolutely.
It was already there.
Absolutely.
So the conspiracy theory, they already know. But I'm going to tell you, I found cousins, I found sisters, and some people got really upset because some people called me up and they say, I'm related to Prince Sorry, and I've taken the DNA, but they don't match me. That doesn't mean that they're not related because the DNA waters down over generations. So if you're like an 8th or 9th generation cousin of mine, you will not match. And since Prince Sorry, his seed spread from Natchez, Mississippi, and from Guinea, because I know my relatives in Guinea now. I met them. Well, I haven't met all of them, but I met one particularly. His name is Dr. Ultimus Gay. He's written a book called A Tossed American Pie, and so I'm in his book. And so because of that, we have formed a great relationship. We met. We know our heritage. He's connected me to my relatives in Guinea. I went to Morocco. I've met the royal family in Morocco, which is King Mohammed's family. So I know who I am, and my DNA speaks from where I'm at. And with most Black Americans, we're from everywhere.
Yeah.
Your DNA, you be looking at the DNA and going, well, who was zooming who? Because, you think you're from somewhere else, and then something will pop up like, you have Filipino. Where did I get Filipino at?
Absolutely.
And where did I get, what I didn't get was Native American. I've always was taught, you got those high cheekbones, you got Indian in
You got Indian in your family.
Native American in you. That was not the case when I did the DNA.
Absolutely.
I was shocked that my brother had Jewish in him, and I didn't have any. So, you don't always inherit every single gene from your family, and I think we need to know more and be more informed from a scientific position about DNA. You don't inherit. That's why you can have a sister and brother, and one sister will inherit maybe the gene for breast cancer. The other sister might inherit glaucoma. You don't get it's not a 50-50 split. So that's why they can't tell you. It's just like rolling the dice. You don't know what gene you're going to get. I have a sister that has green eyes, and I was like, Mom, somebody gave her the green eyes. The other sister had the nice shape. The other sister had the hair. What did you give me? She go, I gave you the brain. I go, oh, okay. But I'd rather had those green eyes and that shape, just honestly speaking, right? But God gives what he gives, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm grateful for what he's given me, right? If that's the brain, right?
Absolutely.
So, I just want our people to start understanding DNA, stop giving into conspiracy theories, because to be honest with you, we suffered the most during COVID. We died the most, right? Now, I don't know. I've been vaccinated. I've been boosted. I haven't had the second booster, and I'm knocking on wood because I never had COVID. But I can't say if it was actually the vaccine. Is it genetics? Because they're finding some people are just immune. Right. So, but I say, let's have the best defense that we have against something that was killing the majority of our population.
Sure, absolutely. And we can kind of take some steps forward by embracing the science. And,
Yes,
because,
embrace the science.
absolutely.
I'm not saying to go out, so I don't want anyone that's listening to say, well, Her Royal Highness Princess Karen said I need to go get vaccinated. That is not what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Find out the scientific data behind it
Right.
and make an informed decision.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it can also pay dividends for your health. It can give you, like you said, it can mention things that you have a genetic disposition towards,
Yes.
and it can help
Now,
you be
so
proactive.
for me, there is some testing now where you can find out what genes you have inherited for your health. I didn't take that because I'm sort of like, and this is me. This is me personally.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to get cancer, or if I'm going to have heart disease or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't, for me, I don't need to know that, because there is not one single person on this earth that I know died from nothing.
Right, right.
Even
right.
if their heart just suddenly stopped, they had a failed heart,
Sure,
right?
sure.
They had a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to leave this earth with something.
Yes.
And I don't need to know. It's just like, do you want to know the time of day you're going to die in the hour?
No.
Most
Right.
people would say no.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't need to know that, because a lot of times people spend a lot of money trying to save their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Because I also am the founder of Think Pink for a Cure, which is a breast cancer foundation. My position was not to be an advocate for treatment. It was to be an advocate for awareness, to understand what you have, to look at the science of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because my mother is 83 years old right now. They went to give my 83-year-old mother a mammogram. I was like, no way, because at 83, if she has breast cancer, let her live her life now. She has 83. She's not going to live another 83 years unless God has given another miracle to her, which is anything's possible. But the probability is very low.
Right, right.
So why put her through the stress and the strain of understanding that?
Absolutely.
When I gave the DNA testing from my mother, I did it so that I could capture it. There are so many, because remember, most Black families don't know where they're from, who they're connected to.
Very
Now, there
important.
has been some heartbreak from DNA,
Mhm.
because some parents have said, some mothers have said, this is your father, and that wasn't your father.
Right.
And I've had a lady call me, and she was very upset because it happens. And she was so angry with her mother. And I said, look, you were born in the late 50s. And you were from a broken home, because it's a precedent that has been set since slavery for the Black male to kind of be pushed from the home,
Mm-hmm.
because that was his job, was to mate, make more babies, so that it was like livestock, it was property.
Right. Yes.
So if you do this, right, unfortunately, it sets a precedent and it lays a foundation, and we're trying to break that, right?
Yes.
I said, your mother did what she had to do, probably to put the food on the table. So don't be so quick to judge, because we have to start giving each other grace,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
right? Whoever your father was for you, that was your father. And your mother will always be your mother, because she is the one that if you were dead in the street with a horrible disease and nobody would touch you, she will lay her hands on you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you have to take DNA only for the purposes intended, is to just find your roots.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Her Royal Highness Princess Karen is also an accomplished author. Can we talk a little bit about your novel, Chain
Yes,
Free?
Chain Free.
And it comes from a different aspect. Some people say controversial about the history of slavery. Can you explain a little more?
It's actually, yeah. So Chain Free is a book that I was writing and wrote, and then it came off the shelf so I could do some rewrites. That's a thing. It was a story about, it wasn't a true story, it was fictitious, but it was based a lot on my upbringing in Natchez, Mississippi. It's about the main character is a young man named Lemon, and Lemon was a half-breed, mulatto, half white, half black, but he took more of his genetics from the white side. He had blue eyes and blonde hair. They were at the slave market in Natchez when a little girl saw him named Vicky Ann. Vicky Ann thought that he was a white boy and wanted to know why he was chained to a wagon. Later, we find out that Lemon was indeed a slave, and he was purchased by her father. But what goes into this is not really a slave story. It's Lemon ends up being befriending a young boy who had been raped by another slave. And Lemon ended up having to protect this little boy by becoming a homosexual in so many words. He became this other slave who was called Black Smoke's woman, pretty much, right? But he wasn't really gay, but he was trying to save the little boy because the other slave was kind of the main slave, you know. So it kind of shows the dynamics of what was going on, because this was actually happening in slavery, which a lot of people don't talk about. There was a lot of homosexuality. There was a lot of rapes of men by the slave owners. And then there was a lot of relationships, because Lemon ends up falling in love with his slave master's daughter, and she in turn falls for him as well. And the little boy that he was protecting end up being gay and falling in love with the master's son, one of them, right? But they decide, Lemon decides to run away with the master's daughter, and they were trying to make it to Canada. And the person that came after him was his son, who he had raised and stopped from being abused, and that's who they had made the head, you know, the head whatever, I don't want to even say the word, the head bad N-word in charge. And so it shows the dynamics of what was going on. It even talks about Vicky Ann, who is the slave owner's daughter. She wanted to be much more than they were allowing her to be. She wanted to go to college. She wanted to not have to get married when she was 16. And it shows how women also suffered and how there was a lot going on. So I was trying to show in the book that it was not just slaves that were suffering, even though we spent a lot of time talking about it. There were so many dynamics, because women didn't have rights. Your husband would go down there, sleep with a slave. She was feeling worthless. There was a lot of depression, and then sometimes the slave owner's wife would kill the slave girl because she couldn't compete. You know, and so there's so much that has went on that has affected our society, both white and black. And I tell people, when we talk about hatred and hating whites and hating blacks, we're entwined. I can't, if I hate white people, I hate a part of myself, because in the DNA, it will show you have Caucasian if you're Black American. So do you take that part of yourself and begin to hate yourself? You can't hate yourself. You're not all Black. We have been taught that we are Black, but we are many races. And if you remove a bit of part of that race from your DNA or from your person,
you know who you are.
Who are you? And do you hate that part of who you are? So to hate a white person means you hate part of yourself.
Absolutely.
So that's what I tried to teach, is we should not be hating. We need to learn to understand how we got here. Until we understand how we got here, we can't change anything.
Yes. Her Royal Highness is recognized, Brother Brown, by the United Nations, her title, this country, the United States, and many all over the globe. Can you tell the average listener what a typical day in your life is like? Carry that title.
That is so cool, because you know that's what I wanted to know. You know that's what I wanted to know.
So I'm also a wife. I'm a mother of 3. And I also work as an engineer, as a cybersecurity engineer. And then I run a foundation and other organizations, and I'm constantly trying to do goodwill within my community. So my days are busy. But before anything, I try to be a wife and a mother first. And I try to, because my role as a mom is a very important role. I know people say, oh, well, my most important thing that I've ever done in my life was to be a mother. I can't say that. My most important role in this life has been when I help other people. There's something, a light inside of me that shines that I can't explain. I remember being a little girl thinking, why did Martin Luther King put his life on the line for other people? You know, why did he put himself in harm's way?
Yeah.
It's infectious to help other people.
Yes.
It's something good. It's something I can't explain, because I'm not this nice person that goes out and like, you need a flower and you need a flower and you need a flower. I need to be nice, because I'm not nice. Like, I'm not that kind of nice.
Right.
I'm a visionary that can see. I can understand from A to Z. I don't know what the middle is. I don't know how I'm gonna get to Z, but I know you better not get in my way till I get there.
Yes.
Because I'm going to get to Z. I'm not going to let you stop me. And I can wake up in the middle of the night, and I know what I have to do. And you know, sometimes I get kind of caught up in religion, because sometimes there was a part in your intro when it says, what religion were we before we came to America? I just want to touch on that very briefly.
Yes, ma'am.
In my family, we were Muslim. But remember, the Arabs invaded Africa, and they invaded Africa before the colonies, before the Caucasians did.
Yes.
The colonists, right?
Yes.
Colonizers, right? So we were already invaded.
Sure.
Africa has been invaded by the Arabs, by the Spanish, by the British, by the Dutch. Everyone has ran through it. So even the religion itself, even Islam, even though it was what most 90% of the Africans that came out were either Jewish, because in Ethiopia, if you came from the east, you had a Jewish foundation. Most Ethiopians are Jewish. If you came from West Africa, you were 9 times out of 10 Muslim, or you had one of the what they call the mythical religions, because they also, in Egypt, there were mythical religions.
Sure.
Right? They had the sun god, the sky god, and so did they have them in West Africa. So when they came to a one god theology, that came first from Judea, and then the Muslims came over and kind of brought that religion in. So when you start trying to think about what religion are we, it's kind of hard to go back to that very beginning, because even Judea had its own, Moses kind of started that religion. So you go, where's the basis of it? And remember, when religion was started, we had also already started to read and write.
Yes.
Right? And even Christianity, which has Jesus' name was not Jesus. That's a Greek name that kind of came from Julius Caesar.
Absolutely.
And so when you go down this path, it starts to shake your theology of who you are. What have I been taught all my life?
Yes.
And so you start to say, I was brought here with one religion, and now I'm this religion that I've been carrying on. And does that religion get me to heaven? And do I need to pray to someone else to get there? So that's what I tell people, because I've been on that journey, and I keep my eyes focused on, I know there's a higher being, because sometimes we don't understand why we do the things we do, because we know something is telling us to do it.
Yes.
And we call it conscious. I call it our God conscious, our supreme being conscious. And so I keep my eye, you know how they say keep your eye on the ball?
Yes.
I keep my eye on God. Anything else, I can't focus on anything. They say, well, Jesus is the Son of God. I keep my eyes on God.
Absolutely.
If I'm going to believe in God, it says believe in one God, believe in God of Abraham, and I kind of stick there. And I say, if you're the supreme being, you have enough power to take me where I need to go.
Absolutely.
I don't worry about the rest.
Absolutely. That was so wise. You with foundations that have built over 100 homes in Cape Town, South Africa, self-funded, not using government funds, doing it pretty much on your own, getting these subcontractors to come in and do this work. For anybody that's listening, especially female listeners, everybody that's listening to the sound of your voice can't be a princess, but like you said, they can all learn to fight like one and to do the great works of a princess. What can you say as a final message to anybody listening, male or female, black or white, that has been inspired by your life and your works, what message do you have for them?
My message is I believe everything is possible. Now, I'm not a big religious person. There's one part in the Bible, it's in the New Testament. I call it theology.
Yes.
And it says, if you have the faith of a mustard seed and the belief, if you said to the mountain, be cast into the sea. I've stood on that all my life. If they strip me of this princess title, no problem for me. I'm still who I am, right? You have to believe that you can do the impossible. You cannot let anybody or anything get in your way, because it starts with belief first. So if you want to save someone, or you want to do something that's impossible, you want to own your own home. I remember walking when I was very young. I was in my early 20s and I wanted to buy a house. I swear my credit score was like 100. And the bank person said, oh, I'm sorry, you have to have you need at least like a 500 credit score back then. And I looked at him and I said, well, I want that house on that street. And he goes, well, you need to have 3% down. And in my mind, I was kind of calculating how many paychecks that would take. And I looked at him and I said, just what I told you at the beginning of the show. You can give it to me today or you can give it to me tomorrow, but you're going to give it to me. And I got that house with 100 credit score because I needed that house more than that man behind the desk did.
Yes.
And I went to the library. I researched how to get it because back then there was no internet. So I had to research, how do you get it with a low credit score? What do I need to do? I called the bureaus. I contacted them directly when you used to could call someone that wasn't in another country. And I said, how do I bring my credit score up? Right? What do I need to do? Because we have to do the work. And as Black people, unfortunately, we don't like to read. You have to read the small print. You have to understand what it is you're trying to achieve. And once you get it, once everything's in black and white, it's right there in front of us. But you have to read it. Once you see the black and white of what it is you're trying to achieve, then you go after it. And you hold that piece of paper and you say, this says I can do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. We are so honored to have you. The Melanated Power Hour, myself, my co-host, so honored. Her Royal Highness Princess Karen of the House of UHURU. Go to her sites, do some research, and look at the work that she's done. Also, from the historical aspect of who her great great grandfather was. I know I hogged the interview.
You asked all the questions that I wanted to ask, so that was cool. Man, I just want to say, Your Royal Highness Princess Karen, man, thank you so much, man. Last week, it was an honor learning about your great-great-great-grandfather. And today to actually talk to you, it was just, man, it was awesome. It was really awesome.
I want to say one last thing in this for you two gentlemen.
Absolutely.
How proud I am of you two. Because through the voice that you're carrying across the radio wires and the streams, you're making some little girl, some little boy, regardless of who they are, know that they can do anything. And I want you guys to continue to grow.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to be an advocate for that. If you guys ever need me, you have a personal invitation from me to reach out to me and my team. And I promise if there's anything I can do to help you guys get there, I will do it.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much.
Okay, and I really appreciate both of you.
Oh, we appreciate you so much, and thanks so much for joining us here. We will join the listening. And real quick, we're moving to YouTube full time. In terms of seeing it, and if you just want to listen through podcast formats,
we're on all major platforms: iHeart, Spotify, Pandora, everything out there that plays a podcast. We're on it. But as far as visual, we're just going to YouTube. There's a couple of things that I didn't like about the other platforms we were using. Yeah. So I just said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and stream it on YouTube. And that way, anybody who has a YouTube, everybody has access to YouTube. You don't have to have a special code or a special be friends with somebody or anything of that nature. You can just go to YouTube and pull it up. So
absolutely.
Well, please put your link on my Instagram. My Instagram is h.r.h.Princess Karen Chapman. follow me on Instagram. I will post on all of my sites. I would put a link on my website for people to come in and get knowledge. And that's what you guys are sharing, this knowledge. And we really appreciate it, me and my team.
Thank you so much. And to the listening audience, we'll see you next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central. But until then, in the words of the great Harriet Tubman, we out.